What up? This is Patrick Haize, and I am out here at Pyramid Rock in Sedona, Arizona. And today what I want to share with you is how to know if you're awake. And it's funny that I use this terminology because I've said many times the term awake is a silly term in a lot of ways, because what does that even mean? Like, to be awake or asleep? Is there just like an on and off switch? You're either awake or you're asleep. And the truth of the matter is that we keep waking up to successive levels of awakening. So it's not like, you're just awake one day, or you have your awakening and now you're awake. It's like, no, you'll continue to wake up to higher and higher levels of yourself and higher truths about what you truly are. But in this video, what I want to do is I want to talk about a certain kind of awake or awakening, you could say, right? I want to talk about a certain level of awakening, a certain spectrum of being awake, and a certain way of being able to make sense and understand in what areas where you might be asleep and other areas where you might be awake, so that you can preferentiate more towards those awake levels and wake yourself up to this higher spectrum of existence. So with that said, in this video, I want to go over 3 different levels of programming, right, that you could say is us operating in a sleep zone. And I want to talk about what awake is, like how to connect in with this higher version of yourself, or this true essence of yourself, and how that then can wake you up out of these different programs, and also not necessarily like remove you from them, because some of these programs are things that we have to operate in order to just be in the physical world, but how you can bring awareness to it so that you're not unconsciously living out these programs, but rather you have your consciousness with you. So by the end of this video, it's going to make a lot of sense what to preferentiate towards in order to continue to wake yourself up, right? And also how to keep track of when you start falling asleep. Because the truth of the matter is that everybody, moves up and down. It's like successive levels of awakening, and then there's like ups and downs on our way up through those successive levels, right? So we're like more awake, and then this amnesia can set in. We can kind of forget our true essence, and we can fall back into unconscious states. And as we walk around in our life, a lot of what awakening is learning how to identify unconscious states that we go into when we slip out of consciousness, identify the triggers and the things that pull us into those unconscious states, and then learn how to modulate that, so we can notice the warning signs when we start slipping into an unconscious state and be like, oh wait, I'm going unconscious here. Let me bring back my memory of who I truly am and wake myself back up so I don't go down into that trough. Because a lot of the drama that we experience in our life, a lot of the hardships, a lot of the negativity that we experience is because we go into these unconscious states and these unconscious patterns, and we don't know how to stop ourselves from going into them. And then we go into them, we're playing out all of these different dramas in the world, right? We're playing into a lot of the worldly karma, right? And we get caught in that, and that creates drama in our life. So what I want to start with the 3 different levels of programming that I want to talk about here. The first level is biological. The second level is ego. And the third level is like cultural acceptance. I'd say it kind of like that. So biological, what is a biological program? Biological program is like our desire for food, warmth, sex, survival, right? These are the biological programs. It's like in our body, and we feel these urges and desires for these things. Nothing wrong with that, right? But it has to be honored that this is like a program that's running within us, right? When we're thirsty, there's water in front of us, we feel the urge to drink that water, right? That's a program that exists, and for good reason, and it should exist, right? But it's important to be aware of this program, right? Second program is ego. Everybody has to deal with ego issues, right? Nobody wakes up enlightened and is totally transcended ego, but everyone, starts as a little kid, and they start waking up and going through stages. There's a time when it's all about me. Mom, look at everything I'm doing. It's all about me. I want to be the one that's the strongest. I want to be the one that's the greatest. It's like everybody goes through that stage, and a lot of us don't actually move out of that stage. But again, there's nothing necessarily wrong with wanting to be great, with wanting to be important, right? But it's important for us to understand that this is a kind of program, right? This is something that, as we all know, if we don't get in check, can become a major source of pain and suffering and destruction in the world, right? Getting too caught in the ego, self-importance. I am the most important. I want to dominate. I want to control. I want to be the one that is number one, right? When people take that too seriously, it's not bad to want to be number one, but when people take that too seriously, it can be really destructive. So that's ego. The third level is social or cultural norms or cultural acceptance, you could say, right? And this is basically, what opinions do I have that are not my own opinion? I took them on because I wanted to be accepted by the people in the community, right? So this could be, like what we think is cool or what we think is right. Everybody's saying this about this kind of movement, and everyone in our community that I want to be like is saying this thing about the movement. So I just take that on as my identity and I start resonating with that idea because I want to be accepted in that. But it's not actually my own idea, right? So this is like cultural norms, and this is everywhere too. Like what's trendy, what's cool, like what's the cool thing, and I want to align with what's cool so that I'm seen as cool in the community, but I'm not actually digging deeper into myself for like, what is my true essence? What's my true expression? So these are the three different levels of, you could say, programming. And the thing to be aware of is that when you look at all those three different levels, how much of your thoughts and your actions and your beliefs and your decisions in life are actually spawned from those three different levels. I mean, you're going through your day on a regular basis, walking around, and how many of your thoughts, how many of your inspirations, and how many of your actions are coming from, oh, I'm hungry, oh, I'm cold, oh, I'm thirsty, oh, I want to have a house, I want to have security, so I'm going to go do this thing for security. Oh, all these different things associated with biological survival or biological desires, right? How many of your thoughts and your actions are having to do with, oh, I want to be important, I want to be seen as somebody important, I want to dominate this situation, I want to be in control of this, I want to be the cool one, I want to be the important one, right? How many of your thoughts and actions are driving you to nurture that ego side of you, right? How many of your thoughts and actions and your behavior is depicted by what other people have told you? This is how something is. This is how this is supposed to be. You didn't think about it yourself, or at least you didn't try to dig deeper into what's truly going on there or what it really means to you, but rather it was safe to just take on the cultural perspective that the other people around you were emitting, because that puts you in a safe place, right? What's cool? What is trendy? What's lame, right? Oh, those pants are lame. Like, why do you think that, right? Like, where did that come from? What thoughts and ideas and beliefs came from social norms, came from social programming in order to be accepted or one of the crew or thought of as cool, right? Or to be safe amongst the community of people that you're around. Religion is a big thing, right? See, like Mormonism, people are, they're kind of bullied into this belief, and then it's like, well, if you step outside of that belief, you start talking against the religion, it's like your whole community will disown you, right? So, but you're not able to actually think for yourself. It's like you just have to align with that. So think about, on all three of these levels, how much does that actually influence your life? And the truth of the matter is, not that all these things are wrong by any means. It's good to have biological drives. It's natural to feel ego stuff, and it's good to want to be able to, like resonate with other people in your community. But how much of that is actually controlling your life to the point where you don't even know what your own opinions are or beliefs are? You don't even know like what your higher self is. You've never made contact with anything outside of that, right? So how much is this actually controlling your life? And this is a good way of being able to determine how asleep you are, right? So how unconsciously you just play out these programs without like a higher awareness surrounding it, right? And what I would call awake is being awake to a higher awareness that transcends all of these different programs. And that higher awareness is, you could call it your higher self, you could call it presence, you could call it a lot of different things. It is the awareness that you are not any of these things. You are not your biological desires. You are not your ego identity and ego desires. And you are not the opinions that you've adopted from your reality. You are none of these things. You're something much grander. In fact, you're something eternal, right? And this is the space that you can get into through different meditative practices. This is a space that I've spoken of quite often. And this is a space that you can get into through meditative practice, and you can study from different gurus or different sages that have been talking about this for a really long time. So awake, what does this mean? Does this mean that you get into this awakened state and then all of a sudden you don't have biological drives anymore, or you don't have ego desires, or you don't ever agree with anyone in the culture? No, that's not what it means. What it means is that when you become awake, when you become in touch with this higher aspect of yourself, that you still play the game. You still have the desires, but you're aware that you're having these desires. You're aware that they're programs. And you can play with the programs, but you don't get stuck in the identity of the programs. In other words, you'll have a physiological desire, and you know that that physiological desire is, inspiring you to go eat some food or, do some particular thing, pay your rent and make the money, right? But you're aware of that, and you don't get so locked into the behavior that you lose contact with the higher aspect of yourself that is connected to unconditional love, that is connected to this grander essence of what you truly are, which is eternal, right? So you start being able to make contact with this eternal part of yourself, right? This part of yourself that's beyond form, that's beyond identity. And then you start to transcend the different identities or archetypes that you play out in the physical world. You might be playing out a physical world drama, like I'm hungry, I need to go eat food, and I don't have money for food, or there's no food anywhere close to me. This is like this common archetypal story that goes on, everyone's experienced in this physical realm. But you realize it's this story, right? It's not like the only reality. It's not your only reality, right? You're not stuck in that story, but you actually can still be present to the moment. You're not just completely hypnotized by the fact that you're hungry, right? You can be present to the moment. You can bring unconditional love to the situation, right? You know that there's something bigger, and you are that thing bigger, but that bigger thing that you are is kind of playing a role right now. And this, extends into the ego identity. This is really apparent in the ego identity. Like, okay, I am this person. Like, I am this speaker, or I am this tech wizard, or whatever your identity is, right? The idea is that you can play those roles, but you have this higher awareness that doesn't attach you to the roles. Like, this is my identity. You realize that I'm just playing this identity out, right? So in a sense, what you're doing is you're bringing this essence, this presence essence, into the lower worlds, right? So you're bringing it into your biology and your relationship with biology and your desires. Bring it into your ego and your relationship with your personal identity and what you think you are, and some of the desires of what you want for status or whatever it is. You're bringing it into it so that you're not necessarily denying those things, but on another level, it's laughable. You see it play out. It's like a dog, barking at a phantom. It's that the dog is just kind of tripping out, and you don't give it too much seriousness, right? You're not like, oh no, yes, there's something here, right? The dog's tricking you into believing that there's a robber, but it was the mailman. It's oh yeah, you're going crazy with the dog. It's no, the dog's tripping out, and you kind of let it bark, but you're not consumed by it. You may have other cultural norms that you resonate with. There might be things that, people are telling you that when you check in, you're like, okay, yeah, that resonates, right? But you also realize it's somebody told you that, and it's not necessarily an ultimate truth that extends for eternity, but it is an opinion, right? And so therefore you don't get too fixed to your opinions, this is the only way that it can be, or you don't get too fixed to a cultural narrative of this is how it has to be, because you're not so much afraid of disagreeing with other people, and you're willing to think for yourself. And you realize that any particular thought, if it's just a thought, it's not the full thing. It can only be a half truth, right? Because there's always different perspectives, there's always a bigger way of looking at it, and all these different perspectives are valid. So if you attach to a particular thought too hard, and you try to reinforce that thought in your life too hard, then you're going to run into resistance. The idea is that you can loosely hold beliefs and ideas and use them for your benefit. But if you attach to them too much, then you're going to start creating restriction in your life, resistance in your life, right? So you can hold a belief, but realize that it's working for you in this space and time, if it is working for you, and it's something to not take too seriously, right? And by not taking it too seriously, it gives you the freedom to be your true self. Because what'll happen is that if you fix to a belief too strong, and then the inspiration to be yourself has some sort of conflict with that idea or that form of thought that you have, then you're going to have this resistance that's going to prevent you from being able to actually be your true self. So the idea is you want to keep it liquid, right? Keep it light, and you keep it light by making contact with this higher aspect of yourself, and then bringing that higher aspect of yourself into your everyday life. So you bring it into all those lower levels. So it's not like you get rid of the lower levels. You don't, I mean, you need an ego in order to operate in the world. I don't mean a negative ego, but you need a self-image in order to, you know, present yourself. Like I present myself with certain titles. I'm a musician. I mean, that's like, technically that's ego. That's an identity that I'm creating inside my head for what I am. And that's very limited to say like I'm a musician. You know, to just like to box myself into that one term, right? And then who knows, maybe I'll evolve and maybe I'll see myself as something completely different. I won't even resonate with the idea of musician. But if I lock myself into that, then I'm stuck. So the idea is we still have to play with the ego. We still have to nurture the physical body. We have to honor our biological drives, and we have to honor our drive to be connected to people and to identify with different, you know, ideas or things that are presented to us in our reality, that we've been programmed with in our reality, right? But the idea is to get in touch with this higher version of ourselves that is beyond all of that, and then bring that presence into our everyday life so that we don't get too fixed, we don't get too rigid in these different expressions. And then we can be aware when we start clicking into a programmed response without that extra awareness there, right? So the idea is if we go into any of these behaviors or we play into any of these programs, it's not that we would never play into the program, but it's that we're aware that we're playing into it and we're doing it willingly from a greater space without too much attachment to it. So it's like, okay, yeah, you know, I'm feeling sexual energy, and it's kind of silly how I get really horny all the time, and I'm always want to like play out these sexual desires, and I can kind of laugh about that. That doesn't mean that I stop having sex, but it's just that like I don't get crazy about it, like, oh, gotta have sex, give it to me. It's like I realize that it's this animal desire in me, and it's kind of funny, it's kind of laughable, and I can play this thing out and have fun with it, but I'm not completely consumed by it, right? And so it's kind of like you take that into all different levels of your life, and you realize when programs are playing through you, but you also have this other awareness that like I'm beyond this, like I'm infinite, I'm eternal, I'm connected to this all. And you can do that by getting to steep in those higher essence energies. And I talk about this in a lot of videos, and I'll get more into specifically how to do that with different meditation techniques and stuff in other videos. But the idea right here is be able to make contact with this higher aspect of yourself. And a lot of you probably have already done this, had these, you know, amazing experiences where you feel like, you know, you're connected to everything and you're bigger than that, and you realize you're bigger than this identity that you have inside your head. You're bigger than these desires, you're bigger than your thoughts, you're bigger than your emotions, and you're like connecting into something huge, right? So the idea is to connect in with that and then bring that presence into your life and let that presence kind of guide you. Let it be with you on your journey. And how I define awake is having that presence with you while you're playing on all these different levels of existence. When you have that presence with you, and you're not super attached to things, but it's just kind of surrounding you and it's guiding you, and this is awake. You're walking in the world and you're awake. When you become unconscious or you go back asleep, this is when you forget the big picture and you get hyper focused and stuck in on this is my identity, or this is this thing that I need right now, or this is, you know, whatever, this is the cultural norm that I'm adopting, and I this is the only way of looking at it. When you get stuck into these things, this is when you go asleep, right? And it's action from that space of stuck in rigidness and like this is the only way it is that perpetuates drama and suffering and karma and negative karma in your life, right? But it's when you can bring that presence in there and you stay liquid that you can actually be flexible enough to move towards your grandest, truest expression, which is multidimensional. There's no limit to it, and there's no particular archetype. And so for you to truly be yourself, you need to be flexible enough to be anything or anyone and shift around to whatever the universe is calling upon you in this moment, right? And I have a song about this, Omni-Frequency. It's on SoundCloud. You can check it out on Spotify, anything like that. But anyway, how do you define whether you're awake or not? Well, your awakeness is how much presence you have in the moment. How much presence you have as you traverse through these. And it's like the balance between macro and micro. So macro is like, I'm everything, I'm God, like I'm connected to the all. And then the micro is like, well, my name is Patrick and I'm a musician and I make YouTube videos, and you know, I all my desires for whatever that is. I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm having this emotion, that emotion. I believe this, I believe that these people are right and these people are wrong. That is the micro, right? So the idea is bringing the macro of like, I'm everything, I'm all things, I'm unconditional love, I'm eternal essence, right? Bringing that and then existing in both, paradoxically existing in both spaces. And what it does is it discharges the push-pull energy of the micro when you bring that macro into the sphere. And then life becomes very beautiful. You become very flexible, and you're able to express your multidimensional nature in a more time-space matrix realm, right? So you become multidimensional, expressed through a more limited space. And this is the union of above and below. This is the divine expression of what you could truly be. So, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Patrick Haize. Like, subscribe. If this video is interesting and you think somebody else might find it interesting also, please share it with them. And I'm super excited to continue giving awesome content to you. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you next time. One love.